Look, mini. Oh, you know, no big deal. Just the propane torch fell from the top shelf onto the floor. God, don't look over here. Don't look over here. Hey everyone, I'm Claire Saffitz. Welcome to my sort of kitchen in a cabin in the Hudson Valley. And we've been taping some episodes, especially for the holidays in this time of year, which has been really fun. And so today I'm making everybody's apparently favorite thing to eat this time of year, which are apple cider donuts. Truthfully, I never had one that I liked because I think that they're overrated. But today, I think that I have assembled a recipe that is incredibly delicious, actually tastes like apple, and it's fun to make at home. Are they good? Are they good? Just a question I have. Today, hopefully the answer is yes. Donuts are not my favorite treat of all time. And I still prefer a yeasted donut over a cake donut. So like apple cider donuts have a couple strikes against them in my book right from the start. My main problem is that to me they can often be really oily and they don't really taste like apple. But I think if we go over a couple of really important like principles of cake donut making and I point out a couple important ingredients that I'm adding and using, then I think we're gonna have a very, very tasty apple cider donut. I don't object to them in principle at all. Just in practice, they don't come out the way I want them to. So today we are making an idealized version of, we could just unplug that thing. We don't have to have that noise go off.
That's okay.
Today I'm making an idealized version of apple cider donuts, hopefully. And I love apple flavor and I always want to get a ton of apple flavor into any apple dessert that I'm making. So that's my goal here, is like we're gonna get an apple cider donut that actually tastes like apples. So we're gonna use a hand mixer to put together the batter. You could use a stand mixer, but I often find it easier to maneuver with a hand mixer. A rolling pin for rolling out the dough. Then over here I have already heating up my oil in a Dutch oven with a deep fat candy thermometer. So here I have a round cutter. To cut the hole, I have just a pastry tip. So I'm gonna use the wide end of the pastry tip and we'll have that shaped donut, which looks good to me. Some parchment paper on a baking sheet and a little bench flour. The most important ingredient that we're adding is apple cider. And here I have 1/3 cup of apple cider that I got from the store and boiled down. So it's unsweetened, unfiltered apple cider. Quiet feelings. I just took basically a 1/2 gallon, so 8 cups, boiled it down to 2 cups, so it's 75% reduced, and then I just measured out 1/3 cup, and then you have the rest for other baking projects. And it does add like a really nice tanginess. The other very important ingredient I have is apple butter. So apple butter is apple sauce that is just further cooked down and concentrated so there's less water. So here I have granulated sugar, 2 large eggs, melted and cooled butter, brown sugar, some sour cream, cinnamon sugar for coating, all-purpose flour, baking powder, baking soda, salt, nutmeg, cinnamon, vanilla. Kind of a lot of ingredients, but the batter comes together very easily. So the first step is to combine all the dry ingredients. I have all-purpose flour. I'm actually not using cake flour because like it needs to have a little bit of structure. So the all-purpose is fine. To that I'm gonna add 2 teaspoons baking powder. That's not right. 2.5 teaspoons baking powder. So I'm adding baking soda and powder, and I'll talk about why. So this is powder, 2.5 teaspoons. And then a 1/2 teaspoon of soda. Then I have a teaspoon of kosher salt. You could do like any warm spices that you like for this. I'm gonna add a teaspoon of cinnamon. I kind of just like the warm spices to be in the background. I don't want it to taste so strongly of cinnamon. And of course I have a little bit of cinnamon sugar to coat the donuts in. And then nutmeg, I go very, very conservative on the nutmeg because I just find it a really strong flavor. And I like it, but it can be overpowering to me. So for this, I'm gonna do a 1/4 teaspoon. This is very lumpy, so I'm gonna break it up.
What about clove?
You wanna add a little, should I add a little clove? I think we have some ground clove. I love clove. Same thing though, it can be really strong. Here we go. But it is that very, very classic winter spice. I actually love clove, but same thing, it's super powerful. So I'm just gonna do like, that's it. Because it's so strong and it's so spicy, you really get it. It just creates like a warming sensation in the background, which I really like. So up to you what you want to use. It could be just cinnamon, could be a mix of stuff.
sugar is a wet ingredient.
Someone's been listening. So I'm just gonna mix this together. With cake donuts, it's tricky because you need enough flour to bind everything together and make the dough workable so you can punch it out and maneuver it into the oil. And of course you need the structure there, but you don't want to put so much flour that it loses all of its flavor and texture and becomes dry. And so it's a little bit of a balancing act. Set that aside. Now I'm gonna mix my wet ingredients, except for my eggs and except for my sugar. So I'm gonna mix the apple cider, the sour cream. Everything is room temp, so the sour cream has been sitting out. The apple butter. If you can't find apple butter, you can make it. You can take applesauce and then just cook it down. You could also just roast it in the oven and let it drive off all the water. And then my vanilla, 1 or 2 teaspoons. So stir all that together. Okay, so I'm gonna start to mix together the batter. I have 2 large eggs, room temp. Then I'm gonna add my sugars. So I have a 1/4 cup of granulated and a 1/4 cup of brown sugar. Okay, so I'm gonna start by mixing this together. So I'm gonna beat this with a hand mixer until it's sort of thickened and lightened. The color has gone a few shades paler and probably like doubled in volume. So you can increase the speed. You can see this is nice and moussey and it's lightened in color and gained in volume. Now I'm gonna add my butter. And I had melted this, but it's kind of cool in here, so the butter hardened again, and I'm gonna warm it up just until it's melted because I wanna stream it in, and it will emulsify into the eggs. Ooh, my hands smell like cloves. Ah! So you just don't want it hot. So melted and cooled, but not quite solidified like I had it. So with the mixer running, I'm gonna stream this in. So you don't want to pour the butter in all at once because you want to give it a chance to slowly incorporate and emulsify. And if you add it all at once, you might have sort of a broken mixture where the butter is not emulsifying with the eggs. But it's only 4 tablespoons of butter, so it's really not very much. So now I'm going to incorporate my dry and wet ingredients. And if anyone is a practiced cake maker, you'll sort of recognize this next step, which is to alternate the wet and dry. So I'm going to add about 1/3 of the dry ingredients. And then as soon as most of the flour disappears, I'm going to work in half of my liquid. And I have like some lumps of the sour cream. It doesn't really matter because it all smooths out. So make sure all that is incorporated. Then half of the remaining dry ingredients, 1/3 of the total. Then the remaining liquid. So when you're adding wet and dry into a cake batter, you always begin and end with dry because the dry ingredients will bring a batter back together if it's a little bit broken, and it can look broken if you add too much liquid. So you just want to always begin and end. You're going to have a nice thick batter, which you need to have because it is not like a cake where you're baking it in a pan. You need to be able to punch out circles and have it hold its shape and be workable to be able to handle it. Then the remaining dry ingredients. And I'm going to mix this until I mostly see the flour disappear, but I have a couple white streaks, and then I'm going to go by hand and finish folding it. So you can see it's starting to get quite thick. So pop out the beaters. So I don't want to overwork the batter, and sometimes it's an easy thing to do with a hand mixer, and I really want to make sure that it's evenly mixed, so no kind of liquidy parts trapped at the bottom, no parts that have too much flour. So I have more control when I switch to a spatula. I can do it this way. Go ahead and fold it well. I have a little bit of extra flour here. I have a piece of parchment paper, my rolling pin. And we want to get this out into like between 1/2 and a 3/4 inch thickness. Give it a little sprinkle. If you hold your hand a little higher, the flour has a chance to spread out as you sprinkle. And then rather than just adding one huge portion of batter into the middle, I'm going to kind of try to spread it around a little bit. Just kind of gives myself a head start. So sort of dollop it around. The batter is thick, but it's still a bit sticky. Once we chill it though, it will firm up. Now I'm going to use floured hands to kind of pat it down. And once I have it in a pretty even layer, I'm going to give it a tiny bit more flour and then put a second piece of parchment paper on top and roll it out to my desired thickness. Keeping in mind the sort of size of the cutter. The dough is soft and my rolling pin has like a little weight to it, so I don't want to press too hard. I'm sort of just like dragging it over. You need to add a little more flour. It's getting a little sticky. All right, that looks good. So I'm going to brush off any excess flour. So now I'm going to slide this onto a baking sheet. Parchment paper goes back on top, and now I'm going to chill this just for a few minutes. If you can fit it in your freezer, that makes it really fast, just like 5 minutes, and then I'm going to punch out the donuts. Oh God! Help! There we go. Oh, that's much easier though. Okay. I just have this one baking sheet, everything else is in use. I'm going to slide it back off the baking sheet onto my cutting board. And I'm going to cover the baking sheet in these little squares. So I like to sometimes use individual little pieces of parchment for each donut because it gives me a means of getting the donut into the oil without having to disturb the dough very much, especially if it warms up again and becomes very soft. I don't want to have to lift the donut into the oil. I can just lift the parchment paper and then it slides right off. Here I have obviously quite a bit of flour. This is for flouring the cutter, which helps to prevent any sticking. I'm going to quickly punch out all the donuts that I can in the shape that I have. So sometimes I like to sort of plan out my root a little bit. I'll do a little wiggle. I press down. Oh God, it's so sticky. More flour for sure. So I would say a generously floured cutter, because the exterior of the dough has dried out a little bit, but the interior still kind of has that wet cake battery texture. I'm going to transfer them at this point to the parchment squares, and then I'll cut out the hole when they're on their final kind of resting place. With a little flour on the spatula as well, just kind of lift underneath. You can dust off any excess flour and place. So obviously the faster you work, the easier it's going to be because the batter will warm up a little bit. So now I'm going to clear off the remaining of the dough, and then we're going to punch out the holes, and I think we can move right into frying. Check my oil. Oh yeah, the oil is almost at temp, so we're going to roll right into frying. So I just dusted off any excess flour because the cutter left kind of a ring of flour. So I'm dusting it off because I don't want that to dry out the donuts at all. And now I'm going to cut the donut hole, the centers. And in that like transferring process, some of the circles got a little bit less circular. So I'm just kind of pressing them out. Some are a little bit thicker than others too. The dough is still nice and kind of workable. Now same thing, I'm going to flour my cutter, which is just the wide end of a pastry tip and straight down. Give it a little twist just so you know that you're removing it. And now to get it out of there, I have like my little, you can use a skewer or a toothpick. I have a little cake tester. So I'm going to go ahead and finish punching out the holes from the rest of the donuts. Save them, obviously. We'll fry them as little donut hole treats, and then we'll move over to the frying area. Let's talk about our at-home deep frying setup. So I have a Dutch oven that's filled with an inch or two of oil. You don't really want to fill it more than halfway. You don't need to. And I have a candy thermometer in here so I see the temp. I'm at like 342 or 44, which is great for frying. You want to be somewhere between 325 and 350. And next to the fryer, I have a wire rack set over some paper towel for draining the donuts. And I have a shallow bowl with cinnamon sugar because I'm going to coat the donuts while they're still hot out of the fryer in the sugar mixture. I have my donuts right here. So you just need something for turning the donuts. You can use a spider. You can use like 2 chopsticks. This is a Danish dough hook that happens to be very useful for cooking donuts. You can lift them out. And so you want to make sure you don't crowd the donuts when you're frying them. So in this Dutch oven, I can probably get, I'll start with 3 and see how they are. You want them to have some room to swim around. Pay attention to your oil temp. You'll notice that when you add a couple donuts, it'll drop the temp, and so you might need to regulate the heat a little bit. But as long as you're somewhere in that 325 to 350 range, you should be fine. You don't want it to go hotter or colder. Hotter means you might overcook the exterior before the center cooks through. Colder means it might absorb a lot of oil as it's cooking, and that's not good either. Once you've added your donuts to the oil, they're going to cook for a couple minutes on each side. They're going to puff. At first they might sink, and then as that baking soda and powder is activated, they'll release some gases. They'll float to the top and bob around. You want to turn them and go until they're like brown and crisp on each side. The dough is already brown, so you are going to get pretty dark, but that's normal. So I have all my donuts fried, all 10 of them, and I'm just going to coat the final batch that came out of the fryer in my cinnamon sugar. And you want to coat them while they're still warm because having like a little sheen of oil gives the sugar something to stick to. But actually, I will point out that like they're not slick with oil. So I think having the oil at the right temp, not crowding it, making sure that it doesn't drop too much means you do not have a greasy donut. And going into the fryer, you definitely felt the weight of the dough, and it, there's a heft to it, and coming out, they've expanded so much in size that they really feel light and airy and not dense. I know the donuts are done because it smells like fry oil in this entire house, but that's okay because now we have these beautiful
Let's rewind. It smells like fall, winter.
Right. What was I thinking? It smells so delicious. The coffee is ready. It's hot. It's steaming. Very excited to have a little treat of something that I think I'm going to like a whole lot. Hopefully, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, get a little coffee.
Okay, coffee is excellent, I have to say. Okay, so it's time to try our donuts. They look great. I have to say, this is a very pleasing thing to look at. Like, I love the little craggy areas. I can tell that the exterior is going to be a little bit crunchy, and then it's picked up this incredibly sparkly sugar. So visually, it's like really enticing me, and I'm excited to try. Should I start with a donut hole? I kind of want to eat like a little, these turned out so cute. Like they're so perfectly round. I just really want to eat one. Ooh, that looks good. Fluffy and not gummy and totally cooked through and light. And you know what I don't see that sometimes I see on cake donuts that I find very off-putting is like, even if the exterior is dry to the touch, sometimes you see oil, like a ring of wet, kind of oily part, and I don't see that at all. So it's a good sign. Donuts are not my favorite treat of all time. Truthfully, I never had one that I liked. I think that they're overrated. Quiet feelings.
Did you convert yourself?
These are really good. These are extremely delicious. They really do taste like apple. If this is what all apple cider donuts taste like, I think I would love them. Let's pull this guy apart. So fluffy, really looks like the interior of cake. Another thing is incorporating apple butter. It does the same thing that it does in a cake, which is it makes it very, very tender. We didn't need to use cake flour, just very tender, light texture. I also think It's a great amount of warm spice. It's just like a background that you get. You don't taste it and think like, wow, it's so cinnamony or it's so spicy. It just kind of combines with the apple flavor to make this really sort of an encapsulation of fall flavors. Really good. Now I feel like I'm like in a cool club of people that I was like, looked at a little bit sideways, but now I get it. These are really good. It really is like the perfect fall treat. So I hope you try it at home. Thank you for watching. I'm gonna finish my donut and my coffee, and remember to like and subscribe. Cut.
I was waiting for a-
Cut.
Cut.
Spud. High five. High five. High five. Good boy. Very good boy.